just a thin strip of land, barely 100 miles wide. It doesn't sound like much, does it? But what if I told you that this tiny bridge of Earth plunged the entire planet into an ice age? It sounds impossible, right? A geological event so small, yet so catastrophic, it reshaped the world forever, unleashing a chain reaction that altered climates, rerouted oceans, and set the stage for the world we know today. This is the story of how the Isthmus of Panama, a land bridge connecting to continents, became the trigger for a global deep freeze. To understand this incredible story, we have to travel back in time, about 15 million years ago. The world was a very different place. North and South America were completely separate continents, divided by a vast, deep seaway known as the Central American Seaway. Imagine the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, not as two distinct bodies of water, but as one enormous, interconnected soup. Warm, salty water from the tropical Atlantic flowed freely into the Pacific, creating a global circulatory system that kept the planet's climate relatively mild and stable. Life thrived in this warm, wet world. But deep beneath the waves, a geological drama was unfolding. The Pacific Plate, a massive slab of Earth's crust, was slowly grinding beneath the Caribbean Plate. This process, called subduction, is one of the most powerful forces on our planet. For millions of years, it pushed up a chain of underwater volcanoes from the ocean floor. Over immense timescales, these volcanoes grew, their peaks breaching the surface of the water, forming a scattered archipelago of islands. Think of it like the islands of Japan or the Philippines forming today. For a long time, water still flowed between these new islands, but the process didn't stop. Volcanic eruptions continued, spewing lava and ash, slowly, relentlessly building up land. Rivers flowing from the burgeoning North and South American continents carried vast amounts of sediment, depositing it into the gaps between the islands, gradually filling them in. Around 3 million years ago, the final gap closed. The underwater mountains, the volcanic islands, and the accumulated sediment finally coalesced into a single, unbroken strip of land, the Isthmus of Panama. The two continents were connected. The Central American Seaway was gone forever. For the animals of the time, this was a revolutionary event. It kicked off something scientists call the Great American Biotic Interchange. Animals that had been evolving in isolation for millions of years were suddenly given a highway to a new world. Giant ground sloths, terror birds, and armadillo-like glyptodonts from the south migrated north. Meanwhile, bears, horses, camels, and saber-toothed cats from the north ventured south. It was one of the greatest migrations in Earth's history, a chaotic and transformative mixing of ecosystems. But the most significant consequence of this new land bridge wasn't happening on the land. It was happening in the oceans. The closure of the seaway was like throwing a giant wrench into the planet's climate engine. That warm, salty Atlantic water that used to flow into the Pacific was now blocked. It had nowhere to go, so it turned north. This newly rerouted current became what we now know as the Gulf Stream. It began carrying massive amounts of warm, salty water up the eastern coast of North America and towards the North Atlantic near Greenland and the Arctic. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute. A current of warm water flowing towards the North Pole, shouldn't that make the planet warmer, not colder? And that's the great paradox of this story. Initially, it did. The warm water of the Gulf Stream carried a huge amount of moisture with it. As this warm, moist air moved over the northern latitudes, it led to a massive increase in precipitation, specifically snowfall. Year after year, more and more snow fell over North America, Europe, and Asia. During the relatively cool summers, not all of the snow would melt. Layer upon layer of snow began to accumulate, compressing under its own weight, turning into dense glacial ice. This is where a crucial feedback loop kicked in. Ice is white and highly reflective. While dark oceans and forests absorb sunlight and heat, these growing ice sheets did the opposite. They reflected sunlight back into space, a phenomenon known as the albedo effect. The more the ice sheets grew, the more sunlight they reflected, and the cooler the region became. This cooling led to even more snowfall, which created even more ice, which reflected even more sunlight. It was a runaway process, a climatic domino effect triggered by that single land bridge thousands of miles away. The entire circulatory system of the world's oceans was thrown into chaos. The Gulf Stream, now loaded with salt because the water had nowhere to go but evaporate, became denser as it cooled in the north. This cold, salty, dense water began to sink to the bottom of the ocean, kicking off a new deep-water current that flowed back south, a global conveyor belt of water that further redistributed heat around the planet in a completely new way. The world's climate patterns were being fundamentally rewritten. The consequences were global. The northern hemisphere plunged into the Pleistocene Ice Age. Massive ice sheets, some over 2 miles thick, began to spread. Covering huge portions of North America, Europe, and Asia, the world that had been warm and stable for millions of years was now locked in a cycle of advancing and retreating glaciers. Sea levels dropped dramatically as vast quantities of the world's water became locked up in these continental ice sheets. Landscapes were scoured and carved out by the moving ice, creating the valleys, lakes, and fjords we see today. This new, colder and drier world presented immense challenges for life. Forests retreated, replaced by vast grasslands and tundra. Animals had to adapt or die. Many of the large South American migrants, like the giant sloths, eventually went extinct. Unable to cope with the changing climate and competition from the northern invaders, the Ice Age gave rise to the megafauna we often associate with the prehistoric world. Woolly mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and giant cave bears all adapted for a life in the cold. And what about us? Our own human ancestors were profoundly affected by this climate shift. The cycles of ice ages forced early humans to become more adaptable, more innovative. They developed new tools, new hunting strategies, and learned to control fire to survive the brutal winters. The lowering of sea levels also exposed land bridges in other parts of the world, like the Bering Land Bridge connecting Asia and North America, allowing our species to migrate out of Africa and across the entire globe. In a very real way, the Ice Age forged by the Isthmus of Panama helped set the stage for the rise of humanity. It's just astounding to think about. The slow, imperceptible drift of tectonic plates, the rise of volcanoes from the seabed, and the final closure of a narrow seaway. A chain of events, each unfolding over millions of years, culminating in a dramatic and sudden shift that plunged the world into ice. It shows how interconnected our planet is, how a seemingly small change in one part of the world can trigger massive cascading consequences across the entire globe. A tiny land bridge wasn't just a bridge for animals. It was a switch that flipped the world's climate from a warm greenhouse to a frozen icehouse. And our world is still living with the consequences of that change today. The story of the Isthmus of Panama is a powerful reminder that on this planet, everything is connected. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this journey back in time, don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories from our planet's incredible past.